A faint pink light filled the corners of the small square room. The young man standing in the middle swallowed hard as he surveyed the bare room without moving his head or breaking his military stance. His muscles suddenly tensed when a small circle appeared in front of his face, emitting a blue light that focused on his face for a moment, then circled around his body before returning to his face, gradually dimming until it completely disappeared and the small circle in the wall closed. The young man's body trembled again when a deep voice echoed in the depths of the room saying, "Welcome to MI6 Special Scientific Intelligence Division, Lieutenant Dean. Your identity has been verified. Please take 3 steps forward and then stop." The young man moved his feet 3 steps forward and stood at attention, feeling for the first time that the walls of the room were rising. He then realized that the circle he was standing on was lowering him down a tube illuminated with a calm, purple light. Lieutenant Nathan Dean's features appeared calm, but inside he was overwhelmed with many questions. It was rare, almost impossible, for the director of the Special Scientific Intelligence Division to personally summon an officer of his rank. Nathan's thoughts halted when the descent stopped, and he found himself in front of a shiny metal door that opened quietly without a sound. Behind it appeared a spacious, well-lit room, at the end of which was a large desk, behind which sat a woman around 55 years old, with sharp grey hair and calm features. Her eyes held a look of determination and dignity. The woman began to speak, gesturing for Nathan to come closer. "Welcome, Lieutenant Dean. Please come forward." Nathan approached the desk and quietly closed the door behind him, standing at attention, with his eyes focused on the commanding woman. He saluted sharply. Commander Helen Briggs smiled and pressed one of the many buttons lined up in front of her on the desk, then looked at the small computer screen in front of her and began to read aloud. "Nathan James Dean, 24 years old, First Lieutenant. You graduated from the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst just over a year ago, specifically on November 5th, 1999. You joined MI6's Special Scientific Intelligence Division 1 month after starting your work with military intelligence. All your reports are rated excellent. I have a confidential report from your superior stating that you are a gifted genius who has outperformed 12,000 members of scientific intelligence across the United Kingdom. I hope you will maintain this level in the mission I will assign to you." Nathan felt tense as he wondered about the serious matter for which the director had summoned him. His questioning did not last long, as Commander Briggs pressed a yellow button in front of her and said, pointing to a screen mounted on the wall to Nathan's right, "Look at this image to your right, Lieutenant. Memorize it well. It is an image of the latest invention produced by our scientists since the development of safe fusion fuel. I repeat, memorize this image well. This device emits a type of radiation that exceeds laser beams by hundreds of times, and our scientists have named it the death ray. This radiation can be used for many beneficial purposes such as surgery, without anesthesia, pharmaceutical manufacturing, advanced mining, and more. However, it can also be used for catastrophic destruction." Nathan's muscles tensed at hearing the last phrase, as he had always hated anything that led to destruction. He often wondered why some people were driven to create tools of devastation. He quickly pushed his thoughts and tension aside to continue listening to Commander Briggs as she continued explaining the mission, saying, "Despite the extreme security precautions in the laboratories affiliated with our division, the secret of this device has leaked. One of the workers in the project sold the secret of the device to a dangerous criminal organisation." Commander Briggs sighed as she continued. "All the workers in the project have been placed under surveillance and thorough questioning, and suspicions have been narrowed down to 3 individuals. You will find their names and positions in the encrypted data packet that will be transferred to your secure device when you leave here, along with all the other information you may need for your mission. The important thing is this: the criminal gang has sent a warning. Using this terrifying radiation, they threaten to destroy the greatest modern facilities across all nations of Europe, unless 7 of the most notorious criminals currently imprisoned in a special maximum security facility on the lunar colony are released. The gang has given us only 5 days to comply with their demands, or they will carry out their threat. 2 full days have already been lost in questioning, and several failed attempts to locate the gang's hideout. That leaves you with only 3 days, Lieutenant. Commander Briggs paused briefly to swallow and then continued. I know your tasks are extremely difficult. You're searching for a needle in a haystack. We have not yet reached the gang's hideout or determined their numbers. I have left you the freedom to devise a plan and choose your team members and resources. You will have access to everything you request. The important thing is success. Do you understand? Success, Lieutenant. God help you. With a single word, God willing, ma'am. Nathan then saluted and turned towards the door, but Commander Briggs stopped him, saying, Remember that our work is highly classified. If you fail, the whole world will know of your failure. But if God grants you success, no one will ever know. Nathan smiled and replied, I will work hard to ensure that no one knows, ma'am. He then saluted again and left the room through the door, which closed quietly behind him. In a spacious room on the second floor of the MI6 Scientific Intelligence Division building beneath London, Lieutenant Nathan stood contemplating his small team. Mark Hamilton, a 21-year-old genius in the field of radiation and its applications, was slight of build with delicate features and wore small prescription glasses. Dr. Ramsey Clark, a 30-year-old psychologist, was tall and thin. Finally, there was Sarah Lawson, a 23-year-old engineer who, despite her youth, was known for her exceptional talent in dealing with monitoring and tracking systems. Nathan broke the silence, saying, First, I welcome each of you. You have been selected quickly and accurately to perform a task of utmost secrecy that requires each of your skills. In short, we will be searching for a needle in a haystack. The three looked at him with curiosity and surprise, and he smiled, saying he would begin to explain the matter in detail. As soon as Nathan finished explaining the topic, Sarah was taken aback, and Mark let out a whistle of astonishment, while Ramsey remained calm, his eyes widening. Nathan continued, As I mentioned, we need to find the needle among the haystack within a time frame of no more than... He glanced at his watch before continuing. 2 days and 9 hours only, which is a total of 57 hours from now. Once the clock strikes 8:50, our mission will be pointless. If I was searching for a specific skyscraper throughout the United Kingdom alone, it would take me longer. But what do you mean? I mean there is a method, a theoretical method. I mean the theory of exclusion. If we exclude the places where the gang members cannot be, we will be left with the places where they could be. Ramsey interjected, saying, I believe I have a better and faster method. Nathan turned his attention to him with interest as he continued. It's a method we use in psychology. Without delving into complex scientific details and terminology, I can say briefly that it resembles the game, What would you do if you were in my place? Sarah looked at him questioningly, and Nathan exclaimed, his eyes sparkling, I understand. Ramsey added, Simply put, I will ask myself, if I were one of those saboteurs, what would be the best place for me to direct my radiation towards anywhere in Europe? Nathan interrupted, saying, Exactly. In this case, this place must meet specific conditions. Mark chimed in. Of course, 3 specific conditions. First, it should be in a central location that allows access to all directions easily. Second, it should be far from public view. Third, it should be isolated, not surrounded by buildings. Nathan raised his eyebrows and said, If we agree with this theory, and I find it quite reasonable, we need to think about locations in Britain that fit these criteria. He then turned to Sarah and asked, You say you are an expert in communications. Can you track a wireless signal or one carried on laser, no matter how weak it may be? Sarah confidently replied, Of course, even if the senders themselves are unable to detect it. Nathan smiled and said, Well, I believe, my friends, that I have a reasonable plan. In a spacious hallway there were 3 men standing with great tension, and silence hung over them. None of them spoke, although their expressions revealed deep concern. The first was a bulky electronics engineer named Dr. Aidan Foster, with thick eyebrows pacing back and forth in clear agitation. The second was a radiation technician named Andrew Sutton, short and thin-faced, nervously rubbing the tip of his nose. The third, Dr. Samuel Avery, was tall and somewhat stocky, moving his head from side to side and fidgeting with his hands in another nervous gesture. The three suddenly turned as Nathan entered the room. He smiled as he observed the visible tension on their faces, then calmly flipped through several papers in his hands, deliberately trying to stir their nerves. He then raised his head to them and studied them in silence for a moment before saying, "Hello. I apologise for calling you at such a late hour, but I needed to confront you all to inform you of the latest information we have obtained." The three fidgeted, and curiosity appeared on their faces. Nathan quickly addressed them, saying, "You are all aware of the leak of the secret regarding the new radiation device that you were part of the project team for. You also know how dangerous this terrible secret is, and you are aware that someone has threatened to use this secret to destroy some modern facilities across Europe." He paused for a moment, studying their faces before continuing. "However, what none of you knows is that we have obtained some critical information regarding..." Nathan stopped speaking and began to observe the faces of the three men, trying to gauge their reactions to his words. He then continued, "Regarding the spy who sold this secret." Surprise appeared on the faces of the three, but none of them spoke until Nathan dropped his bombshell, saying, "And I regret to inform you, gentlemen, that this traitor is one of you." The three shouted in anger, and the engineer Aidan Foster yelled, "Listen, Lieutenant, perhaps your superiors have granted you some authority here, but that does not include the right to insult any of the workers in this project or accuse them of treason." Nathan calmly interrupted, saying, "Allow me, sir, I have only accused one of you, and it is not necessary that I mean you. Perhaps..." At this point, Andrew Sutton shouted angrily, "Perhaps what? Perhaps I am the one you mean? Or do you mean Samuel? Listen, young man, I have never felt regret for working at this scientific research centre, but if you continue with your rudeness, I will interrupt you," Nathan said, cutting off Andrew and ignoring his comments. "Everyone's situation has been examined since the beginning of the Death Ray project, including their financial, social, and moral conditions, and I regret to say, their family situations as well. We have also interrogated everyone, and for the first time, we used the frequency psychological analysis device. This thorough investigation has revealed that the spy must be one of you." Samuel jumped from his seat, shouting, "How dare you accuse us?" At that moment, the calm look in Nathan's eyes was replaced by a stern gaze that froze the three men. He raised his arm forcefully, signalling them to be silent, and said in a frightening voice, "Hold on, gentlemen. I have no time for pleasantries, only for facts, and the time is too short to waste on such trivialities. So, listen to me, all three of you, and do not interrupt. And do not..." The three men fell silent, and Nathan continued, "I have gathered you here to tell you one thing only. We have almost located the hideout of the gang that threatened destruction. In just a few hours, they will be in our custody, and at that time the traitor will be caught, and no one will spare him." He then made a generous offer. "Let the traitor confess, and I will guarantee that he will only be transferred or dismissed. Otherwise..." It was a clear threat. Despite this, none of the three men moved, although signs of anger were evident on their faces. Nathan waited for a while, and finding no response from any of them, waved his hand dismissively and said, "Fine, each of you may return to your room. I no longer need you." He turned and left, leaving them exchanging glances filled with a mix of astonishment, anger, and disbelief. The three then silently and angrily retreated to their rooms. As soon as each of them closed the door to their room, one of them began pacing like a wounded lion, a storm of anxiety swirling in his mind as he spoke to himself. Is what this lieutenant is saying true, or is it all just a trick? But why? It would have been better to focus efforts on discovering the gang's location rather than searching for who sent the secret. But he says they have almost reached the hideout. Impossible! They cannot have found the hideout so easily. I spent a whole month thinking about the best places until I arrived at this location. It must be a trick, without a doubt. Then why did he tell us? Perhaps it was a negotiation tactic. No, it's a trick, a clear trick. What awaits me, I wonder? This is all strange. He should have kept his information hidden from us, so it must be a trick. If it is true that they have reached the gang's hideout, then that spells doom for me, unless the gang escapes before they arrive. If that's what he wants, to warn them. But how did they reach the gang so quickly? Britain isn't that large, but searching for a device the size of the death ray is nearly impossible. He glanced at his watch. Only about 50 hours remained until the deadline. He went to his bed, hesitated as he rubbed his left leg with his hand, and lay down trying to sleep. But his thoughts, despite his efforts, kept returning to the same thing, and he spoke to himself again. It's a trick. I can almost swear to that. It's impossible to reach the hideout in such a short time. That's more time than we took to choose the hideout. But if we assume, just assume, that what this lieutenant is saying is true, then that would be extremely dangerous. This could be the end for me. No, it's a trick. A genius like me cannot fall for such a trick. And if it's not a trick, then let me rearrange the information calmly. Damn it. I'm so tense, and my mind is so confused. The man stood up, then moved a small panel on the left side of his bed, revealing a small cavity. He took out a small device and rolled it between his fingers hesitantly, saying to himself, "What if it's a trick? But what if it's true?" In any case, it's impossible to pick up signals from this precise device. It's a masterpiece, transmitting sound on ultra-short waves. Then I must warn my comrades. But he returned the device to its place, closed the panel, and began pacing the room anxiously, his mind screaming, "It's a trick! It's definitely a trick!" 4 mysterious signals, Sarah said with boredom, addressing Nathan. "I'm starting to doubt this plan of yours, Commander. 10 hours have passed, and I'm still waiting for this signal. He must be too clever to be fooled by such a plan, despite its intricacies." Nathan replied, pacing the room nervously. "I agree that 10 hours is a long time, but a criminal is a criminal. I didn't set this time limit for no reason. I have completed the investigations regarding the suspects and have reached a good conclusion. I have completely ruled one of them out." Ramsey interrupted, saying, "I can rule out too. Do you know, Commander, that this frequency psychological analysis device is amazing? It's time for security personnel to trust psychological analysis as a clue against any suspect, or as a defense for them. If you studied the psychological life of a specific man or woman, you could definitively determine their ability to commit a certain act, or their inability to do so." Nathan had been stroking his chin with his left hand while listening to Ramsey, his face showing signs of deep thought. Then he interrupted, saying, "You've pointed out a very important point, my dear doctor. Indeed, psychology is a wonderful science. I believe I can narrow down the suspicion." Their conversation was interrupted by a faint voice from the device and a triumphant shout from Sarah, and everyone rushed to the small monitoring device placed on the windowsill. The voice of Sarah rose with joy. "The plan has succeeded. Here is the awaited signal." She quickly sat in front of the device and began to fiddle with its buttons and keys, and a look of excitement spread across her face. Her features showed intense focus and concern, and the sound of the signal became clear after everyone fell silent. The small device no longer emitted its buzzing sound, and after about 7 minutes it stopped. Sarah turned to the 3 men and said in a hushed voice, as if afraid to break the silence in the room, "It's definitely a secret code, and the type of signal is strange. It's neither wireless nor carried on laser beams, it's carried on particles." Mark said, "Maybe you mean a type of particle radiation like alpha or beta rays." "I think I know what this signal is. It's a dream for many of us." He then turned to Nathan and said, "This signal's carried on alpha rays, Commander. I can almost swear to that." Nathan moved towards a television screen on the wall and said, "The important thing now is to decode the signal." He pressed a small button next to the screen, and a face appeared on it. "I have a message in code. I want to know its content as quickly as possible," Nathan ordered. The young technician, whose image appeared on the screen, replied, "The computer department will analyze it immediately, sir, on the latest computer for decoding the message. If necessary, He was interrupted by Nathan, who said, "I don't care about the details. The important thing is the message. I will relay it to you right away." Nathan turned to Mark and Sarah, who were relaying the message, and said, "I tasked you during the past hour to study everything related to death rays. Do you think you can find a way to prevent their effects?" Mark nodded thoughtfully and said, "The nature of these rays is particle-based, like alpha and beta rays, and they are not wave-based like gamma rays or X-rays. Particle rays have an important characteristic. They always carry an electromagnetic charge, either negative or positive. As for the death rays specifically, they carry a strong negative charge, and I believe the best way to prevent them is to have a strong positive magnetic charge around their area. According to the theory of opposites attracting, the particles of the death rays will be attracted to the positive charge, especially if it is stronger than them." Mark continued explaining the technical details, and Nathan listened carefully before making a decision. He turned to Sarah and asked her, "From which room did this signal originate?" Sarah whispered, "From room 3. "Andrew Sutton's room?" Nathan nodded slowly and said, "Then the traitor will regret not having bargained with me over the offer I made him. The signal had a completely different impact across London. In a hidden chamber deep beneath the Tower of London, 2 men received the warning with immense fright. The first was a bald man with thin eyebrows, compact and nervous, known to his colleagues as Bates. He read the decoded signal while wiping the heavy sweat pouring down his face, and then shouted to his tall colleague, 'What has this fool done? Doesn't he know what could happen if they succeed in tracking this signal?' The tall man stood in the corner of the cramped stone chamber, his features sharp, with a long nose, a thick moustache, and a pointed chin. His name was Victor Cross. His plump colleague responded with a gesture of his hand and calmly said, 'Impossible. You can't track such a signal. Sutton is truly a genius.' He straightened up, and seriousness appeared on his face. But why would he send such a signal? We agreed not to send any signals except in cases of extreme necessity, Bates said nervously. Do you think he has fallen into their hands? Victor shouted, shaking his arms vigorously. No, he's much smarter than that. What worries me is the content of the message. Bates wiped the sweat pouring down his face and said, flustered, Do you think they will actually reach our location? Victor fell silent for a moment, thinking, then waved his hand dismissively and said, Impossible. This place could not even occur to the smartest of their smart ones. Remember how long it took us to determine this location? The Tower of London's ancient foundations, the forgotten medieval chambers beneath the White Tower. Entry to these sections has been forbidden since the restoration work in 1998. I assure you with confidence that reaching us is impossible. Bates swallowed hard and wiped the sweat from his face, saying, Should we respond to his signal then? Victor hesitated for a moment and then said, Sutton confirmed that tracking this type of signal is impossible, but I don't want to take any risks. No, I will not send any replies. Bates trembled with anxiety and then said, But perhaps he will think that the message didn't reach us and perhaps he should resend it. Or maybe he thinks what they are saying is true. I believe we must send a response. Victor stood up and began to pace nervously around the cramped stone chamber, deep in thought. The medieval walls pressed in around them, damp with centuries of moisture. Then he suddenly stopped, hit the wall with his fist and shouted, The humidity in this place is suffocating me. It's driving me crazy. This dampness is almost killing me, even though we are in the last days of December. Bates, trying to ease the tension, said, It's just your nerves. Bates protested, I don't know why the organisation chose us specifically for this location. This cramped chamber is killing me. They know I can't stand in closed spaces. Why didn't they... Victor interrupted with a sharp cry. Shut up and let me think, damn you! Then he looked at his watch and said, It's impossible for anyone to know our location. And even if they did, with the death ray device operational, if anyone tried to invade the place, which is impossible, we would unleash destruction across London before they could stop us. Bates asked nervously. Should we send the signal then? Should we respond to Sutton's signal? Victor stroked his chin thoughtfully and paused for a moment before answering. Let me think a little before I decide. Sarah said with boredom, I can't comprehend these statements, but I do know two things. First, there are only 35 hours left until the deadline. And second, drowsiness and boredom have taken over me. The three of them looked at her with concern and she laughed, saying, And I also know that I am the only communications expert here, so I will fight off sleep until I receive the signal, if they send it. Mark turned to Nathan and said, Let's talk so that sleep doesn't take over us. Read to me the content of the message after the code computer analysed it. Nathan reached for a small table beside him and picked up a paper, reading what it contained. Important information, questionable in its validity. They say they almost reached the hideout. Be careful. Mark laughed and said to Nathan, A small message filled with doubt and certainty. Sarah said proudly, One letter from it would have been enough for me to track it. The three men laughed, which annoyed Sarah, prompting her to say, You are all such arrogant men. I am the greatest expert here. But she suddenly stopped at the sound of a voice coming from her device. Back at MI6 headquarters, a surprising development occurred. Sarah looked at her watch, then froze and asked Nathan, Do you think they will respond to the message, Commander? Nathan smiled and pointed to Ramsey, saying, Direct your question to our psychiatrist. Ramsey laughed as he replied, I should first study their psychology, but if we consider that they are doing something illegal, and if we apply the ideal criminal psychology to each of them, we would say it's natural for them to respond to their leader's or agent's message. A criminal by nature tends to be suspicious and anxious because he knows his actions deserve punishment. He always fears falling under the justice system, and this tension within him drives him to commit acts contrary to logic or caution. The three jumped to her side and she turned to the device, adjusted it carefully, and listened. After 3 minutes, a triumphant shout came through, and she jumped in the air, screaming with joy. Everyone cheered and Ramsey said, The plan worked! Fantastic! Nathan quickly approached Sarah and said, Determine the coordinates quickly, then turned to Mark and Ramsey, shouting proudly, We succeeded. His eyes were filled with determination. You are a genius, Commander, Mark said excitedly. I do not envy those unfortunate souls when they are hunted by a man like you. Nathan's face showed satisfaction from this praise, and Sarah saved him from his momentary pride when she said in an excited voice, I got the coordinates, Commander, but... Nathan asked eagerly, But what? She extended her hand to him with the paper. But it's clever. They are really clever. Nathan took the paper from her, read the coordinates, then raised his head in astonishment and turned to a digital map on the wall screen, studying it. He then said in wonder, What intelligence? Mark and Ramsey rushed to him, and he pointed to the coordinates on the map. With astonishment clearly visible on their faces, the screen activated, and Nathan pressed a secure communication button. Soon the image of Commander Helen Briggs appeared on the screen. Nathan stood at attention and said respectfully, Ma'am, the plan worked, and we've located the hideout of the criminals. Commander Briggs, her usual stern composure cracking slightly, exclaimed, Wonderful, wonderful, Lieutenant. Tell me, are you certain of this result? Nathan immediately replied confidently, Yes, ma'am. A clear look of admiration appeared in Commander Briggs's eyes as she focused on Nathan, saying, It's wonderful that you are exactly what we needed, Lieutenant. Now what are you waiting for? Mobilise tactical teams and neutralise the threat immediately. Nathan swallowed hard and said hesitantly, I don't think a direct assault on this hideout is that simple, ma'am. Commander Briggs's expression hardened. Explain, Lieutenant. What's the complication? Nathan took a breath. The location, ma'am. They've chosen brilliantly. They're beneath the Tower of London, in the forgotten medieval chambers under the White Tower. Commander Briggs went silent for a moment, the implication sinking in. The Tower of London, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of Britain's most iconic landmarks, filled with tourists and crown jewels worth billions. She paused. If we storm it and something goes wrong? If that death ray activates? Precisely, ma'am, Nathan replied. We cannot risk a direct assault. The cultural devastation alone would be catastrophic, not to mention the potential casualties if the device activates. I have a better plan, but I'll need resources and time. Commander Briggs considered this carefully, then nodded slowly. Fine, Lieutenant. I'm trusting your judgment. You have 34 hours. Use them wisely. What do you need? Electromagnetic containment equipment, a tactical infiltration team, and access to the tower's underground structural plans from the 1990s restoration project. Nathan replied quickly. You'll have everything within the hour, Commander Briggs said. Don't let me down, Dean. I won't, ma'am. Nathan saluted and the screen went dark. He went to the window of the operations room, pulled back the curtains slightly, and looked out toward the distant lights of the city. Then he said to himself in a low voice, Nearly 1,000 years of history, and now it's the perfect hiding place for criminals. Mark, Ramsey and Sarah approached him, and Sarah said, It was truly impossible for me to think of this place. Who would dare hide beneath one of the most heavily guarded sites in all of Britain? Mark continued, and yet those old medieval chambers have been sealed off for decades, brilliant and insane at the same time. Nathan, pointing toward the distant Tower of London, visible across the Thames, said, Yes, hidden beneath one of Britain's greatest treasures, the Tower of London. Preparations were underway in the scientific equipment bay belonging to MI6 at the edge of the Thames. Nathan was standing with Dr. Alan Davies, head of the research department, a large man with a broad face, wearing medical glasses and a white coat. They stood in silence, contemplating the strange pink wires being carefully loaded into the huge air transport vehicles. Nathan looked at his watch. It indicated 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the last day of December, and they still had 20 hours until the deadline. Dr. Davies asked him, Don't you see, dear Lieutenant, that these criminals are extraordinarily clever to choose the Tower of London as their hideout? Nathan replied calmly, Of course, sir. They threaten to destroy modern facilities throughout Europe. But who would dare attempt to destroy, or even significantly damage the Tower of London to eliminate them? The political and cultural fallout would be devastating, the head of research replied with grudging admiration. Exactly, Lieutenant. Moreover, it would be nearly impossible to destroy those medieval chambers without using at least a tactical nuclear device, which would obliterate half of East London. Nathan grimaced and said to Dr. Davies, Please, sir, I can't stand hearing about weapons of mass destruction. Dr. Davies laughed and patted Nathan on the shoulder, saying, You're an interesting contradiction, Lieutenant. A soldier who hates destruction. But perhaps that's exactly what makes you effective. Nathan smiled wryly as he watched the last bundle of pink electromagnetic containment wires being placed in the final transport vehicle. I suppose so, sir. Dr. Davies walked toward the control centre, and Nathan walked beside him. Davies asked, But you haven't told me yet, Lieutenant, why the traitor hasn't been arrested despite knowing his identity. Nathan replied, I fear that Andrew Sutton might have arranged with his accomplices to send a regular check-in signal. If he were arrested and the signal stopped, his men might learn of his capture and initiate the destruction before we are fully prepared to stop them. Better to let him think we're still investigating all 3 suspects. Dr. Davies admired Nathan's reasoning and said approvingly, Excellent strategic thinking, Lieutenant. I've been impressed by your work ethic as well. While your colleagues took brief rest periods, you've been coordinating non-stop for nearly 15 hours. He paused. Have you ever considered research work? You have an excellent analytical mind for scientific intelligence. Nathan laughed tiredly. If this mission fails, sir, I might take you up on that offer. Otherwise, I prefer fieldwork. Dr. Davies laughed heartily, and those who saw them together would never imagine that they were preparing a plan to save London and potentially all of Europe from catastrophic destruction. The red secure light was illuminated at the door of the operations planning room, indicating that a highly classified briefing was underway. Inside the room, Nathan stood before a large, holographic display showing the Tower of London's underground structure. His watch indicated 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They had only 16 hours left. Nathan said, addressing Dr. Davies and his team, "Let's review the mission parameters. The time is now 1600 hours, and in exactly 1 hour and 2 minutes the sun will set, allowing us to begin covert deployment at 1800 hours, as planned." He glanced at Sarah, Mark and Ramsey before continuing. "The operation commences at precisely 1800 hours. Here's the tactical breakdown. First, we evacuate the Tower of London under the guise of a security drill. Tourist areas will be cleared with minimal alarm. The yeoman warders and security staff will be briefed by their commander on a credible cover story. We establish a secure perimeter with a radius of 1 kilometre around the tower complex." Nathan manipulated the holographic display, showing the containment network. Simultaneously, our technical teams will deploy specialised electromagnetic containment wires in a network configuration around the underground medieval chambers. The wires connect to a precision nuclear power cell. Our engineers estimate a 2-hour deployment window, accounting for all variables including structural complications in the ancient foundations. He zoomed in on the underground section. At approximately 2000 hours, plus or minus 30 minutes depending on deployment speed, we activate the electromagnetic field. The network is designed with its positive charge directed inward toward the chamber and its negative charge directed outward. This creates a containment barrier. The positive charge will attract and absorb the negative particles of the death ray, preventing them from escaping the containment zone. The negative outer field will repel any radiation that approaches it, providing a secondary failsafe. Nathan's expression grew serious. "Critical limitation. This electromagnetic configuration can only be maintained for 40 minutes maximum. Beyond that, the repulsion between the positive charges on the inner walls will cause catastrophic field collapse. Additionally, if the criminals activate their death ray, the interaction between the weapon's negative particles and our positive field will gradually weaken our containment strength. This gives us exactly 40 minutes, Nathan continued, directing his words to his team, to infiltrate the chamber, neutralize the 2 criminals, and secure the death ray device. If we fail within that window, the containment field collapses and they'll be free to activate their weapon." He then gestured to Sarah and asked, "What did the thermal analysis of the tower's underground reveal?" Sarah replied, reading from a datapad. "Thermal imaging shows only 2 human heat signatures in the sealed medieval chambers beneath the White Tower. Based on body heat distribution and movement patterns, both subjects appear to be adult males. One is stationary near what we believe is the death ray device. The other moves periodically, likely on guard duty." Nathan nodded. "Only 2 operatives on site. Bold but logical. They're relying on the death ray for protection, not manpower." Mark let out a low whistle and said, "Only 2 people? What audacity! This organisation threatens to destroy infrastructure across Europe with just a handful of operatives." Dr. Davies interjected, "These 2 occupy the critical position, young man. We know from our captured surveillance data that they have at least 3 more members operating externally as spotters and communicators. And who knows how large their organisation truly is." Ramsey added, "I don't think the organisation is large. Their strength lies not in numbers, but in this devastating device and their strategic boldness. However," he paused thoughtfully, "criminals of this profile typically position lookouts near their primary location. I'd estimate at least 2 or 3 more operatives watching the Tower of London approaches, ready to relay warnings." Nathan pointed to Ramsey and asked, "What's your psychological assessment, Doctor?" Ramsey answered, "It's highly probable. Criminal psychology, especially for technically sophisticated operations like this, emphasizes redundancy and surveillance. They'll have assumed we might locate them eventually. Excessive caution is often the very mistake that exposes criminals to justice. But in this case, we should assume they have external watchers. Nathan listened attentively, then turned to Sarah and asked, "Since the last signal we intercepted from Andrew Sutton to the criminals, have there been any other signals transmitted in either direction?" Sarah confidently replied, "Not so far. Complete radio silence. They're being disciplined." Nathan turned to Mark. "You said earlier that the criminals' signals are carried on alpha particle radiation. Can you jam or intercept those signals before they reach the chamber beneath the tower?" "Yeah." Mark thought for a moment, his engineering mind working through the variables, then answered, "I believe I can." Before Nathan could express doubt, Mark added with more confidence, "Actually, I'm certain I can. I'll deploy a beta particle interference field. Since beta particles carry the opposite charge to alpha particles, they'll disrupt and scatter any alpha-based communications." "Yes, Commander, I can guarantee it." Nathan said with intensity, "This is mission critical. We must prevent any signals from reaching the criminals in that chamber before we activate the containment network and begin our infiltration. If they receive a warning, they'll activate the death ray immediately, possibly before we're ready to contain it." Dr. Davies, who had been following Nathan's planning with clear admiration, said, "Did I not tell you, Lieutenant, that you possess an exceptional strategic mind? Your tactical planning is remarkable for someone your age." Nathan, barely acknowledging the compliment, said with focus, "This means we adjust the deployment timeline. Mark, you'll arrive at the tower first with the technical team to establish the beta particle jamming field. Once you confirm the communications blackout, the main engineering teams will follow with the containment wires." He checked his watch and asked Mark directly, "Can you have your jamming equipment ready and deployed by 1800 hours? Mark replied confidently, "Absolutely. I have the equipment prepared. Give me 2 technicians and 30 minutes on site, and I'll have a jamming field that could block signals from the Prime Minister himself." Nathan smiled grimly. "Then you move out immediately. Sarah will coordinate your communications and provide electronic warfare support. Ramsey," he turned to the psychologist, "what's your assessment of likely criminal response when they realise they're under communications blackout?" Ramsey replied thoughtfully, "If we consider the psychological state of individuals engaged in high-stakes criminal activity, especially when they suddenly lose contact with their support network, the response will likely be escalating paranoia. They'll suspect they're compromised, which could trigger 2 responses. Either they'll attempt to flee, or they'll accelerate their timeline and activate the weapon preemptively. However," he paused, "if the blackout occurs gradually or appears to be a technical malfunction rather than active jamming, we might buy additional time before they panic. So Mark, make your jamming field look like natural interference or equipment failure on their end, not active countermeasures." "Understood," Mark replied. "I'll modulate the beta particle field to create intermittent disruption that mimics signal degradation rather than complete jamming. It'll seem like their equipment is malfunctioning." Nathan turned to Dr. Davies. "Sir, I'll need authorization for one more critical element." "Name it," Davies replied. "The corridor leading to the medieval chamber is narrow, medieval construction. It can accommodate only one person at a time. Once we breach that chamber, whoever goes in first will face both armed criminals and potentially the death ray itself at close range." Nathan's jaw tightened. "I need to be that person." Sarah's face went pale. "Sir, but we can send a tactical team, armoured soldiers." Nathan cut her off gently but firmly. "This is my mission. Commander Briggs assigned it to me, and I won't send others into danger I'm not willing to face myself. Besides," he tried for a lighter tone, "I'm the one who found them. It's only right I'm the one who brings them in." Dr. Davies looked at Nathan with a mixture of respect and concern. "That's remarkably brave, Lieutenant, or remarkably foolish. I'm not certain which." "Perhaps both, sir," Nathan replied, "but it's the right call." A single tear slipped down Sarah's cheek before she quickly wiped it away and turned to adjust her equipment, not wanting the others to see her emotion. In a secure safe house 3 kilometres from the Tower of London, the external members of the criminal organisation sat in a state of mounting tension and anxiety. The leader was a scarred man with cold eyes named Derek Moss. He stood by the window, watching the distant tower through binoculars. The other 2 members, both younger men with nervous energy, sat monitoring communication equipment. Derek looked at his watch and muttered, "Only 15 hours left and the government still hasn't responded to our demands. Damn them all." One of the younger men, trying to maintain calm, replied, "The boss said they always negotiate at the last possible moment. It's a psychological tactic. We need to be patient." But the other young man suddenly said with alarm, "I'm seeing unusual activity near the tower. About 20 minutes ago, several security vehicles arrived, and they're evacuating tourists earlier than normal closing time." Derek spun from the window, his scarred face contorting with fury. "You fool! Why didn't you tell me immediately?" The man stammered, I thought it might be normal security protocol." Derek crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed the man by his collar. "Normal protocol? They're clearing the tower. That's not normal." He released the man with a shove. "Send an emergency signal to Victor and Bates in the chamber. Warn them immediately. Hurry." The communication technician rushed to his equipment, his fingers flying across the controls. He activated the alpha particle transmitter, encoded an urgent warning, and transmitted it toward the Tower of London. But after several seconds, his face went white. "Boss, the signal's not transmitting properly. I'm getting massive interference." Derek's blood ran cold. "What kind of interference?" "I don't know. It's like something's actively blocking our alpha frequency. But that's impossible. That technology doesn't exist outside of advanced military research." Derek grabbed his emergency kit and a weapon. "We're blown. I will not go back to the lunar prison. I will not be taken alive." He turned to his men. "Get to the backup transport now. We need to reach Victor and Bates before MI6 does." The 3 men rushed out of the safe house, jumping into a high-speed vehicle. This was their critical mistake. MI6 surveillance drones, positioned strategically around known criminal safe houses, immediately detected their panicked departure and began tracking them. There was a spectacular chase through the streets of London between the jet vehicle driven by the 3 criminals, reaching speeds of 200 kilometers per hour, through narrow streets, and the lightweight MI6 tactical pursuit vehicles, which could accelerate to 250 kilometers per hour and had the advantage of aerial drone coordination. The chase tore through East London, past shocked pedestrians, through red lights, the criminals growing increasingly desperate. Within 15 minutes, MI6 tactical teams had successfully cornered the vehicle near the Limehouse district. The 3 men were surrounded, outmaneuvered, and outgunned. Derek Moss collapsed to his knees in furious tears when he found himself in custody, as if he had forgotten the simple truth that crime doesn't pay. While armed police were leading the captured criminals to secure detention for interrogation, the technical teams at the Tower of London were working with precise efficiency to deploy the electromagnetic containment network as quickly as possible. Among them, Mark Hamilton and Sarah Lawson monitored every frequency for any signal that might reach the criminals in the chamber below. Inside the medieval chamber beneath the White Tower, Bates suddenly shouted with a mixture of astonishment and alarm, "Bloody hell! What's happening? Our external communications just went completely dead." Victor rushed to the small monitoring screen, his facial muscles tensing as he studied the readouts. "I don't know what's happening, but something's very wrong. All our frequencies are showing interference." Bates's voice rose in panic, trembling. "They found us! They found our location!" Victor slapped him hard across the face and shouted, "You coward! It's impossible. This must be equipment malfunction. These chambers are shielded by meters of medieval stone. No one even knows these passages exist anymore." But Victor fell silent, his own confidence wavering, and Bates pressed him anxiously. But what if it's not a malfunction? What if they're jamming us? But why would they work at night? And why haven't we heard any activity above us? If they'd found us, they'd have sent in tactical teams by now. The tower would be lit up like Christmas. Bates shouted in rising panic. They've found our location. We need to activate the death ray now. Destroy London before they stop us. Do it now. Victor grabbed Bates and pushed him against the damp stone wall. Shut up, you coward. Let me think. We can't activate without confirmation. If this is just equipment failure and we launch, we'll have revealed ourselves for nothing. But if it's MI6... He trailed off, trying to make the impossible decision. Send an emergency signal to Derek. Try every frequency we have. If anyone can get through this interference, it's our alpha particle transmitter. Bates, hands shaking, rushed to the communication panel and began desperately attempting to transmit an emergency signal. But unknown to him, Mark Hamilton's beta particle jamming field was scattering every transmission into useless static the moment it left the medieval chamber. At that moment, Nathan had finished putting on his advanced tactical protective suit and helmet. He turned to the tactical commander beside him and asked, "Status on the containment network?" The commander replied, 95% deployed, sir. Our technical teams have exceeded expectations. They've completed the setup in about 50 minutes less than projected time. Time until activation? Nathan asked. 10 minutes maximum until the network is complete, and we can energize the electromagnetic field, sir. Nathan nodded and said, "Those were the longest 50 minutes of my life. Let's hope the next 40 are more successful." He checked his weapon one final time, a specialized non-lethal incapacitation rifle designed for close quarters. The tactical commander looked at him with respect and said, "Good luck, sir. We'll be right behind you once you breach the chamber." Nathan smiled grimly. "I'm counting on it." Nathan moved toward the ancient entrance to the forgotten medieval passages beneath the White Tower, and the tactical commander watched him go, whispering to himself with admiration, "What a brave man." Deep in the medieval chamber, Victor suddenly stopped pacing and pointed to a warning indicator on their security panel, shouting, "Look! Proximity alarm. Someone's entered the sealed passages. They're coming." Victor rushed to Bates and snatched their death ray activation control from him. He moved toward the chamber entrance, shouting in desperate fury, "I'll kill them all. No one enters this chamber while I'm alive." He turned back to Bates, pointing at the death ray device, and yelled with finality, "If anyone makes it past me, activate the device. Destroy everything. Destroy them all." As he positioned himself to defend the entrance, he suddenly froze when he heard Bates screaming in absolute panic from the weapon control station. No, the rays are being contained. They've surrounded us with some kind of energy barrier. The death ray's radiation is being absorbed. My God, we're finished. We're trapped." Victor abandoned his defensive position and rushed to the death ray device, his face contorted with terror. Impossible! Impossible! They won't capture me alive. Fire the death ray at full power. Overload it!" Bates shouted back. "The device can't handle that much reflected energy. It'll explode." Victor slapped him viciously and yelled, his voice breaking with desperation. "I told you to fire at full power. Do it!" At that precise moment, Nathan Dean was cautiously advancing through the narrow medieval corridor, his weapon raised, his senses heightened. He could hear raised voices ahead, and he saw a faint, ominous glow emanating from the chamber entrance. Nathan's mind raced with tactical calculations. They're firing the death ray at full power. Those lunatics. The device won't withstand the feedback energy at that intensity. It's going to explode. His thoughts were interrupted when Victor Cross suddenly burst from the chamber and positioned himself in the corridor, about 7 meters ahead of Nathan. The light from the chamber doorway silhouetted Victor's tall frame, making him clearly visible to Nathan, who instantly froze in the shadows, controlling even his breathing, hoping the man wouldn't spot him before Nathan could act. But Victor's voice rang out with mocking confidence. "One man? What a pathetic joke. They send one man to stop us. Keep your hands away from your weapon, fool, or I'll kill you where you stand." Nathan realized with a sinking feeling that Victor was wearing infrared tactical goggles, allowing him to see Nathan's heat signature in the darkness. Nathan tried to buy time, thinking fast. What good will killing me do you? The tower is surrounded by MI6 tactical teams and armed police. 2 men can't fight their way out. Victor's laugh was harsh and disbelieving. What? How did you know there are only 2 of us? Answer me before I shoot. Nathan, bluffing desperately, said with false confidence, Your leader Andrew Sutton confessed everything. The game's over. I'm advising you to surrender now while you still can. Victor's face twisted with rage and fear. He raised his weapon, aiming it directly at Nathan. Nathan's hand moved instinctively toward his own weapon, but before either man could fire, a catastrophic explosion erupted from the chamber behind Victor. The death ray device, unable to withstand the massive feedback energy from firing at full power against the electromagnetic containment field, suffered a complete structural failure. A blinding golden light burst from the chamber entrance with tremendous force, creating a shockwave that threw Victor Cross violently against the medieval stone wall. The impact was devastating. Victor's consciousness fled as he collapsed to the ancient floor. The shockwave hit Nathan as well, throwing him backward down the corridor. His tactical helmet absorbed some of the impact, but the concussive force was overwhelming. The corridor filled with thick, acrid smoke and stone dust shaken from 1,000-year-old walls. Outside the White Tower, the tactical commander stood with his teams, watching intently as their instruments monitored the electromagnetic containment network. Concern was clearly visible on his weathered face. One of his lieutenants approached and reported with tension in his voice, "Sir, the radiation levels inside the containment field are extreme. I don't think our network can hold for more than 20 additional minutes at this intensity. What are your orders?" The commander replied nervously, "I agree, and that worries me greatly. The criminals activated their device at maximum capacity. If this continues, and the containment field fails..." He didn't need to finish the thought. Every man there understood the implications. Suddenly, their tactical monitoring equipment registered a massive energy spike, followed immediately by a muffled explosion from deep beneath the White Tower. The ancient fortress shook noticeably, so much so that several people outside feared the historic structure might collapse. But after several terrifying seconds, the tower stabilized, standing as tall and proud as it had for nearly 1,000 years. The radiation levels on their monitors dropped to 0. The death ray had been silenced. The commander's face split into a triumphant grin. "The device has exploded. The containment network held. We did it, men. We bloody well did it." Then his expression shifted instantly to concern, and he shouted, "But Lieutenant Dean! Oh God, he was inside when that happened." Without waiting for orders to be given, he ran past the containment network toward the tower entrance, followed by a dozen tactical team members. They rushed through the ancient passages, following the route Nathan had taken. The narrow medieval corridor was filled with choking smoke and dust. 20 meters in, they found Nathan Dean lying motionless in the middle of the passage. His tactical suit scorched, his helmet cracked. The commander dropped to his knees beside Nathan and quickly removed the damaged helmet. He pressed his ear to Nathan's chest, listening desperately for a heartbeat. For one terrible moment there was nothing, and the commander shouted in anguish, "His breathing stopped!" Dear God, no. A faint pink light filled the corners of the small square room. The young man standing in the middle swallowed hard as he surveyed the bare room without moving his head or breaking his military stance. His muscles suddenly tensed when a small circle appeared in front of his face, emitting a blue light that focused on his face for a moment, then circled around his body, before returning to his face, gradually dimming until it completely disappeared, and the small circle in the wall closed. The young man's body trembled again when a deep voice echoed in the depths of the room saying, "Welcome to MI6 Special Scientific Intelligence Division, Lieutenant Dean. Your identity has been verified. Please take 3 steps forward and then stop." But then Dr. Ramsey Clark rushed forward from the second wave of responders, pushing through the tactical teams. "Let me through, I'm a doctor." He dropped beside Nathan and immediately began emergency resuscitation, pumping Nathan's chest with precise, rhythmic compressions, then providing rescue breaths, continuing the cycle with professional efficiency. 30 seconds passed. 45. A full minute of desperate effort. Then Nathan suddenly coughed, his body convulsing as his lungs fought for air. Ramsey didn't stop his efforts until Nathan's breathing became regular and his eyes fluttered open. The tactical commander let out a tremendous sigh of relief and shouted with joy to his teams, "He's alive! Thank God Lieutenant Dean is alive." Ramsey, sitting back on his heels and wiping the sweat that poured down his forehead, despite the cold, damp air of the medieval passages, looked at Nathan with profound respect and said quietly, "What an absolute hero." 30 minutes later, Nathan stood among the tactical teams and his own specialists outside the White Tower. He was battered, exhausted, covered in dust, but alive. He held a secure communication device and spoke directly to Commander Helen Briggs. "Mission accomplished, ma'am. No casualties on our side. The death ray device has been completely destroyed. Both criminals in the chamber have been neutralized and taken into custody. The Tower of London sustained no significant structural damage. The containment network performed perfectly." Commander Briggs's voice came through the speaker, filled with genuine joy and profound admiration. "This is wonderful, Lieutenant Dean. More than wonderful. I can hardly believe this success. It's like something from a film, brilliant work." Nathan allowed himself a tired smile. "Thank you, ma'am. Your confidence in me meant everything. If I may request, there's one final step I need to take before we return to headquarters for the full operational debrief." Commander Briggs responded quickly. "Of course, Lieutenant. Whatever you need." Nathan's expression hardened as he looked back toward the tower. "We've eliminated the operational criminals and destroyed their weapon. Now it's time to cut off the head of the snake. Time to arrest the traitor who made all of this possible." Nathan strode purposefully into the MI6 research facility, where Dr. Alan Davies served as department head. Davies stood with several colleagues, and as soon as he saw Nathan, he rushed forward with congratulations. Sarah Lawson, who had coordinated communications throughout the entire operation, couldn't contain her relief and joy. Tears streamed down her face openly. As soon as everyone finished congratulating Nathan on the success of his mission and the salvation of London, Nathan turned to Dr. Davies with a serious expression and asked quietly, "Is he still in his office?" Dr. Davies replied with a knowing look. "Yes, he has no idea about the arrests or the outcome. As you requested, we've maintained complete information security." Nathan asked, "Does Andrew Sutton know about the capture of his accomplices?" Sarah answered, composing herself. "No, sir. Not yet. He's been isolated in his quarters, as per your instructions." Nathan nodded with grim satisfaction. "Then let's end this." In one of the residential quarters of the research facility, Andrew Sutton paced nervously in his room, talking anxiously to himself. What's happening? Why all this suspicious movement in the facility? The security alerts, the encrypted communications, the sealed corridors. Could this be related to the death ray operation? I haven't received any signals from Victor or Bates for over 6 hours now. The communications blackout is complete. What could have gone wrong? His anxious thoughts were violently interrupted when the door to his room burst open with tremendous force. Andrew spun around in fright, and his eyes widened in terror when he saw Lieutenant Nathan Dean standing in the doorway, followed by Dr. Ramsey Clark, Mark Hamilton, Sarah Lawson. And behind them, Dr. Alan Davies himself. The expressions on everyone's faces were cold, professional, and utterly unforgiving. A tense silence filled the room as Andrew tried desperately to regain his composure. He attempted to project innocence and confusion. What's happening? How dare you invade my private quarters like this? What's the meaning of this?" Nathan's voice was ice cold as he interrupted. "The game is over, Dr. Sutton. You've lost." Andrew, still trying to maintain his facade, asked with forced confusion, What are you talking about? Have you all gone mad? Dr. Alan Davies stepped forward, his disappointment and anger evident, and said in a firm, final tone, "There's no point in denial anymore, Andrew. Your accomplices, the men you positioned beneath the Tower of London, have been arrested. Your external support team has been captured. They've all given full confessions." Unfortunately, his voice carried genuine regret despite his anger. The death ray device exploded during the containment operation, killing no one, but destroying your leverage completely. I'm sorry, but there's no escape. It's over. The facts were undeniable. There was no room for doubt or deception. The operation had failed. His partners had been captured. Everything was finished. Andrew Sutton's careful composure finally shattered. His face crumpled and tears began streaming from his eyes. "Mercy," he whispered desperately. "Please, mercy." Nathan's response was cold and without sympathy. There is no mercy for those who create weapons of destruction and threaten innocent lives. I've always hated destruction, Dr. Sutton. I hate even the word. He continued relentlessly. You had an opportunity to accept mercy when I offered you a deal hours ago. But like most criminals, you thought you were cleverer than you actually are. From the moment you transmitted that signal to your accomplices, I knew exactly who you were. You may think you are a genius, and perhaps in some ways you are, but you failed to use that genius properly. If you had presented your revolutionary invention regarding alpha particle communication transmission to the research department legitimately, you would have achieved significant recognition and success. But instead, Nathan's voice dripped with contempt. You're simply a mass of brilliance corrupted by bitterness and greed. You revealed yourself with your own invention. Which of the three suspects could possibly have developed such sophisticated particle communication technology? Obviously, the one most experienced and skilled in advanced radiation physics. Andrew shouted desperately, trying to justify himself through his tears. No one ever appreciated my talent. They always kept me in the lowest positions. I'm better than all your celebrated scientists. I deserved recognition. Nathan cut him off sharply. Shut up. You might indeed be more intelligent than many of our scientists, but you're also morally bankrupt. If you had chosen to use your brilliance for good, rather than for extortion and terrorism, you might be leading our research programs right now. But look at what your choices have brought you. You'll spend the rest of your life in the maximum security prison on the lunar colony, alongside those 7 criminals you tried so desperately to free. And here's an ironic detail for you to contemplate during your imprisonment. They'll know you're the fool whose failure kept them locked up. I'm sure they'll be absolutely delighted to meet you. Nathan sat down across from the broken, weeping man and said with finality, "Crime doesn't pay, Dr. Sutton. It never does." Andrew Sutton looked at Nathan with hollow, defeated eyes but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. After the formal arrest and as Andrew was led away in restraints by security personnel, Sarah Lawson proudly approached Nathan and shook his hand firmly, saying with genuine admiration, "It was an honour working under your command, sir. This operation was absolutely brilliant." Nathan's face flushed with embarrassment at the praise, but he smiled warmly and replied, "I'm always grateful to work with people as talented and dedicated as all of you. This success belongs to the entire team." Dr. Ramsey Clark asked with genuine curiosity. "Commander, there's something I don't understand. If Andrew Sutton is genuinely this intelligent and possesses such revolutionary communication technology, why didn't he use it to demand something more substantial than simply releasing 7 prisoners from the lunar facility? It seems like wasted leverage." That's an excellent question, Ramsey, and it gets to the heart of Sutton's true plan. Demanding the release of those specific criminals, despite their dangerous profiles, served multiple strategic purposes. First, it demonstrated to governments across Europe the terrifying power of the weapon Sutton possessed, and their complete willingness to comply with his demands, no matter how extreme. This established his credibility and power. Second, it would have given him 7 highly skilled, ruthlessly loyal criminal operatives who owed him their freedom. So the demand wasn't about the prisoners themselves, it was about establishing both technological supremacy and building a criminal army for future operations. He would have had both overwhelming technological power and dedicated human resources. Ramsey looked at Nathan with open admiration and said thoughtfully, "I can honestly say, Commander, that you're one of the finest analytical minds I've ever studied, and I've spent my entire career studying psychology and tactical thinking. I sincerely hope we have the opportunity to work together again." Mark Hamilton laughed and said as he prepared to leave the room, "Farewell, our brilliant commander. We're at your service whenever you need us." Sarah grabbed her equipment bag and headed toward the exit, giving Nathan a warm, respectful farewell that spoke volumes about the bond the team had formed during this intense operation. As soon as Sarah left and closed the door, Nathan finally allowed himself to relax. He sighed deeply, yawned tremendously, and glanced at the digital clock on the wall. He smiled to himself with exhausted satisfaction. He hadn't slept since the moment Commander Briggs first assigned him this mission more than 36 hours ago. Nathan collapsed into a comfortable chair, closed his eyes, and felt sleep beginning to claim him. But before he could fully drift off, the door opened again quietly. Nathan's eyes opened, and he saw Sarah returning to the room. She approached him with a slightly embarrassed smile and said, "Forgive me, Commander. In all the excitement, I completely forgot to congratulate you properly." Then she noticed the exhaustion, evident on his face and in his posture, and her smile became more gentle. "You genuinely deserve the recognition you're going to receive. Commander Briggs told me privately that you're being promoted effective immediately. Congratulations, Commander Dean. Well deserved." Nathan smiled tiredly and gratefully. "Thank you, Sarah. That means a great deal." Sarah nodded and quietly left the room, carefully closing the door behind her. Nathan waited until he heard the door click shut, then finally completely allowed himself to surrender to the overwhelming exhaustion. Within seconds, Lieutenant Nathan Dean, soon to be promoted to full commander, fell into a deep, well-earned sleep. The death ray conspiracy was over, London was safe, Europe was secure, and Nathan Dean's legendary career in MI6's Special Scientific Intelligence Division had truly begun. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel.